All right, welcome everybody to 12Petals' first Fireside Chat of September 2021. This one is called Unheard Voices, Why Inclusivity Matters in the Arts, or Why Inclusivity in the Arts Matters. Today we're going to be exploring the concepts of, generally just like the concepts of diversity and inclusion, which are principles that are really close to 12Petals. Just because a major part of our mission has been to provide non-musical or extra perspectives to musicians to expand their worldviews. So it's a really special topic to us, and we have two really cool guests and experts on to speak today who have done a lot in that world. First is Felix Phang, who is an Felix is right over there with all the plants behind him.
Hello.
Yeah, he's an adjunct professor at LASALLE College of the Arts and head of the music and drama company at Singapore, which produces both live and digital content for Singaporeans and high-profile government events. He's one of Singapore's leading next-gen contemporary music composers, whose works focused around tradition, culture, and change have been presented at international music festivals and symposiums. And given his history of experimenting with unconventional combinations of sounds, like string quartets performing Bulgarian folk songs, to reviving historical genres like Shanghai jazz, to going as far as creating instruments out of novel materials like ceramics, we're hoping today to get some of Felix's perspective on the value of diversity in music and of placing musicians in unfamiliar environments. So thank you, Felix, for joining us. And then our other guest is Julian Newman. He's right over there. I can't control who's on the screen, but Julian's right there and he's waving. And Julian is the founder and CEO of Culture Creative, which is an international award-winning consulting firm that's helped hundreds of companies develop cultural awareness through training, keynotes, workshops, vision strategy, and more, all anchored in the values of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. A lot of commas. Julian is a cultural intelligence strategist, author, and motivational speaker who's spoken to more than 100,000 people and groups nationally and internationally over the past 20 years. Julian speaks on behalf of the National Diversity Council and serves as an advisor to the Disruptive Technologies think tank. So I think he's quite qualified today to give us some thoughts on the value of diversity in organizations and what it takes to create harmony among people. So those are our two awesome experts. Basically, the way this is going to go, we're just going to ask a few questions. We'll kind of let it flow for like 40-ish minutes, and then the last 15-20 minutes we'll have room for audience questions. And yeah, that's basically it. We'll see how it goes. So to kick it off, I'll just direct a question to you, Felix. What drew you to putting together new combinations of sounds? Like, how did you get into that as like your life career, and how has that informed your sense of the value of diversity?
Oh, hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. This is the first time I'm actually talking about my perspectives in terms of like diversity in my approach in music and life in general. I think this is a casual chat. Yeah, I just want to share some of my personal take on these things. I think naturally I'm quite a hungry person. I eager to know more and wanting to see what's beyond where I'm from, which is Singapore. Because Singapore is a really small place, and if we think that the world is just around us, then that's going to be a problem. From young. So I mean, just going back when starting from young, I was in a band, concert band, and we are exposed to, in Singapore, we are exposed to generally in Western music, and that's where my foundation is. And actually, um, my first experience with sounds that are unconventional. It's actually when I went to this World Music Festival called WOMAD. That it was held in Singapore, and I was just very interested to just blew my mind because I see so many different types of instruments other than Western. Western meaning like your traditional classical instruments like your regular string, uh, winds, brasses, etc. Even the percussion that we use in concert bands are at most in percussion. It doesn't go anywhere beyond that. And when you visit WOMAD, in this festival, you will see didgeridoos, you'll see like tablas, for example, etc., and how they actually contribute to a really different sonic palette. And I thought, that really that is really interesting. But I couldn't do much about it because my musical sense was very low at that point. So fast forward, I went to university at Berklee and wanted to be a film scorer, right? And in Berklee system, it's the first 2 years you don't have to really declare your major. Do whatever you want. By the third semester, you declare your major. And so because we were made to go through this whole jazz harmony foundation, so that was actually my first experience in jazz, and it just totally blew my mind because like wow, suddenly there's just so many ways and ways to play with sound in just pitches, as well as from the composition aspect will be rhythmic figures, etc. And so I just changed my major into jazz composition, as well as because Berklee is also a very diverse place. You have many international students coming in, and of course, within US you have people from the US, whatnot, and they are all into different kinds of music, and they are and one thing I really enjoy being there at Berklee was that everybody would do what they were doing. So, I would go to like people who are into certain kind of music, you know, at that time, we have iTunes and I mean we had to play music off our hard drives and not streaming, right? So I would dig their music libraries and find of like bands that I've never heard of, because even today, what we know in terms of the bands and artists is really what we consume and what is being fed to you. So you actually don't really know who are the must listens, than the some of the more niche areas. So I think all these access and opportunities in really help in trying to find out a bit more. So basically, that's really where I had the idea of like, I really wanted to uh, explore a lot of sounds and etc. And basically, that's what I did in school. But when I came back to Singapore, I was still very driven in the whole jazz composition, in more European jazz style. Um, but I started to realize that the music I made is quite foreign to what is being played in Singapore. Like it's not something that people are exposed to. Uh, Simply because that in Singapore we're just too young in the music history to have people to have a very diverse group of people going out to learn composition other than classical composition, so jazz composition for example, and returning back to Singapore and offer different sounds, right? As residents Singaporeans, and not visiting artists. So I started to question and also decided that okay, I think where I'm coming from is I also deep inside I don't have I also feel that there's a part of the music that doesn't really stick to me as well, because when I present this music in the backdrop and understanding of Singapore, I don't think it really is relatable and it connects. And then I look around me, I'm like, Singapore is so rich in terms of cultures. You have people from all over the place as well. The three main races in Singapore, or four, Chinese, Malay, Indians, and others, Eurasians, for example, in this case. Each culture offers so much. And I thought, why not look into their cultures? Because a diverse range of music and sounds, genres within their own culture, etc. And then I started to dig, and I realized, I mean, there are a lot of good things, valuable points from every culture. But from that whole exploration, I also start to realize about why aren't these looked at earlier? Well, they are now, and have been, but I thought it could be more meaningful. It could be of a more meaningful experience rather than a very siloed one. People playing within their communities, and even when we come together, I think it's more. It's a really multicultural approach where we all respect the instrument for what it is, the culture for what it is. But I think in terms of integration, then that's something that could be looked at a bit further. Yeah. So, I mean, just to not take up too much time. Basically, when I ran through this, exercise and research with all the different musicians, I started to learn a lot more about the different instruments, different cultures, and I thought that this is something that we should bring it out to the people, and I don't think that should be only within Singapore, but I'm just starting within the Singapore environment first, because we have all these resources, and we also have people who have been trained in their own mother tongue. For example, Chinese musicians China to specialize in different kinds of music, right? Southern Chinese music, Northern, and likewise in India, for example. And I think the advantage that we have is that for Singaporeans, our native language is English. I think it's very easy to translate, especially we all grew up in the same education system as well. We know how we learn. And I think, and that is really the advantage of like passing down information. I mean, because when I said we know how we learn, is because I think Singaporeans, we need tables, we need diagrams, and we need these things. But when I went to US to learn, it's nothing so much like that. So yeah, so it helps, even in the pedagogical side of the things. So yeah, and I just so to me, the whole cultural identity thing it's culture shapes us, right? It shapes our identity, it influences us, how we behave, and it makes us who we are. So I'm also trying to see what does this journey bring me to, so the outcomes. I think there's no one single outcome. I think all these like information can be translated into many things. I mean, if just within music itself, it can be translated into different genres of music, right? Not necessarily just music. So, I mean, just to give you one brief example about how some of this music has been brought to other cultures' music brought to the Western side or whatever. In the area of fusion music, you bring in ideas of the Indian counting system, for example, right? And John McLaughlin, for example, ventured into it, and these are all very, very common things, like it's like a rhythmic modulation concept. Or yeah, I mean specifically, it's called Konako. That's the thing that you can Google, yeah, and how this has applied not only in the rhythmic sense, but fusion musicians take it and use it, apply it in a melodic sense. So they kind of play melodies over the bar line in broken phrases. So it gives you the illusion that these phrases are equal, but they're actually not. And that's just something that you don't really find in your Western music as often. I mean, in the most traditional sense. Yeah.
Okay, and that was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no, it was perfect. There's so many places I want to go into. I'm trying to think. I feel like the first thing that comes up for me is a question that you asked at some point, which was, why aren't these different cultures explored earlier, or why isn't it normal for people to be exposed to these different kinds of this kind of diversity of approach? And I think that would be actually a good segue to you, Julian, because I'm curious about how your journey started. And I don't know if I misheard this, but is it correct that there was a problem you were trying to solve when you got into the diversity world? Because yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm curious about, because it seems like the default landscape is lacking in diversity, and lacking in diversity of views. And so, Julian, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that, and if that relates to how you first started on your journey.
Well, thank you, Justin. It's great to be with you. And Felix, that was extraordinary. For us non-musical folks, you just gave us an education, right there. And so thank you for that. I love what you talked about in relation to us not having the opportunity to learn about others earlier in our lives. And I really believe that that's connected to value. We don't necessarily, we value our culture and this is normal. Other cultures are strange, abnormal, or odd. And so it's cool and it's okay for us to be exposed to it, just as long as we recognize it's not as valuable. It doesn't have as much. It's not as rich as our own. And so when we look at other experiences, other cultures, other lenses, and to engage the world in relation to what Felix is talking about in terms of creating art that amazes and inspires and moves the soul and transforms the heart. Well, in order for you to do that, you have to get outside of what I like to call the couch of your cultural comfort zone. And so in my situation, I grew up in the West Coast of the United States, in California. I moved to the Midwest, and I was working for a nonprofit at that particular time. And it was very, it was very clear to me that I was in a very different environment from a cultural standpoint. And so I'm sure you guys are at least somewhat aware of some of the disparity when it comes to race in the United States in particular, particularly the African American or Black experience. And so the area of the United States that we were living in, it was very, very segregated. And there was a school district that my older daughters were attending, and there were things that were happening that were overtly racist and very difficult. And I had the belief system that most of the racism or the worst manifestations of it were in the past. And so I had an upfront experience of, this isn't past, this isn't small, this is constant, and it's right here. And so I think whenever we have an issue, a challenge, a problem that's in front of us, we have a decision to make. Are we going to retreat from the problem or the issue? Are we going to blame others for the problem, or are we going to do our best to try to solve it and try to bring progress? And so I opted to try to be a part of the solution, to try to bring, to help solve and to make progress. And I didn't plan on this being a part of my life's work, but over the course of time, it really has been central to my personal mission. And I think that it's important as we address and we have conversations of diversity, inclusion, equity, and belongings. We talk about how it manifests its thing in business, in the arts, in technology, that we understand that all of us have something to give, but none of us have everything. And so we can contribute if all of us invest our something, then we have everything, but not one person or one group has everything that we need. And so the thing that we talk about at my company, on our team, is that we want to create atmosphere. We want to help organizations, industries, create atmospheres, environments where every person can achieve the highest level of their human potential. And so think all the isms, racism, sexism, all those different things reduce the ability that we have to achieve the highest levels of our human potential. And so diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging is important for us to change the trajectory of those historic injustices that aren't just regional or national, but they're international. And every aspect in every continent that we on the globe right now, these issues are an issue, but it's going to take all of us to lean in to help solve it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it also reminds me, or it struck me also that just from this conversation, because all I know is the American experience, and I know the kinds of racism that happens here. But Felix, even you were meant, like, there's so many different cultures in Singapore and in just in that region that are coming together, and I'm sure you experience a similar kind of racial disparity there. Do you have your own experiences of having undervalued certain cultures, and then having been exposed to the value of them through your music or through your explorations of the different kinds of musical cultures, Felix?
Sorry, can you just say the question again?
I'm saying, like, basically, like, I'm just curious because I know there's white and black. White and black is basically the classic racial issue in America, but it happens all over the world, and as Julian said, it's international. And I never even thought of, like, Singapore and, like, all the different Asian cultures that are coming together. And I was wondering if you had some insight into, like, perhaps how your valuing of different cultures has changed as you've explored, as you've gotten deep into exploring each kind of culture, even through a musical lens, where you found out that you undervalued certain cultures, and you were in line to adjust your viewpoint as you paid more attention.
Right. I think if it's not, I mean, to be honest, if it's not for music, I think my relationship with the other cultures, other races won't be as close, as developed. Simply because we grew up respecting different cultures for what it is, and there are lessons, and we are all have early education on what are some of the festivals and occasions that the other cultures in Singapore, or rather all the Singaporean cultures that we all share in terms of from the different races. We all do that, and I think I also experienced that it has to be a little bit more than just classroom education about what is Hari Raya, for example, what is Deepavali, and what is Chinese New Year or Mid-Autumn Festival about. I mean, why would the Malay or Indian or Eurasian be interested in Mid-Autumn Festival, you know? And for example, I'm just saying, right? They could be, and yeah, and simply because of maybe there's a lot of activities going on in the community, you know, whenever there's a different celebrations or festivals going on. But what is that? How do we go deeper and really, you know, have that kind of involvement to find out a bit more? So there's community centers in Singapore that try to do that. But personally, I think it's also about the individual relationship that you form and your interest in just your basic, you know, instinct and interest in different cultures. And for me, I mean, it has been music that has brought me to a conversation that is far deeper than, you know, just your regular New Year's celebrations and things like that, you know. While that, you know, through music we also understand what kind of music do they play during their New Year's, for example, you know, and what are some of the history behind, like for example, some of the chord music, you know, and how is it significant today, and how did it influence other genres that became popular and maybe even played at some of the traditional weddings. And, you know, so all these actually, I kind of go from in terms of from the musical lens to actually find out more about the cultures. And I think that could be one, yeah, it could be, that is one way. And I think there are many musicians that are also interested, but they just don't know how to start. I think the biggest challenge is we all know what we don't know, right? And when I had musicians coming in to share about their musical culture, maybe just one, because they're practitioners, they may not be able to understand the way that you might understand, because they come from a cultural musical education. For example, in Chinese, you learn in numbers, right? Or you read in numbers, not necessarily in the 5-stave musical stuff. Where Western musicians, kind of trained musicians, kind of need like, oh, give me the bar lines and, you know, where are the pitches. So when it comes to explain concepts, there is a gap, and because we don't know what we don't know. That's false. So we pretty much rely on the practitioner. But so I think slowly, you know, when we have conversations and, you know, we can kind of close out this gap, and then I think the understanding will come over time. Yeah.
That actually goes to the next question I kind of wanted to get into, which was, Felix, it sounds to me like music was your bridge to get into these different cultures and to develop a more diverse perspective. And either one of you can answer this, but the question I'm curious about is, what do you guys think are the conditions or constraints that are necessary for successfully combining different ideas or different viewpoints? What is the environment that facilitates that?
Well, I think there has to be a common vision or a common goal. You know, I think what Felix was saying in terms of music, you know, being the bridge or the doorway or the pathway into, you know, this expanded world, you know, this greater lens. And so I think it's important for us to recognize that we see that in not just in music, we see that in sports. You know, the Olympics, for all of its imperfections, is an attempt to bring people together under the banner of athletics. We see that in other spaces and places where we have a common vision, or we have a goal, a team, a group, a direction, a destination. And that is the rallying point that helps bring us together. So I think an important aspect to create the atmosphere where a greenhouse, if you will, for these things to grow is for there to be some commonality. What is our common vision? And so we don't just do these things just because. We do it because we have a reason. And we have to have a compelling reason to do it. And so I think one of the questions that that is important is, what do we want our future to look like? And I think Felix talked about it has to be more than classroom. And so it isn't just learning in a classroom. And I think you said that so well, but we have to live what we've learned. You know, we've got to actually live it. It has to be more than just something that we read in a book. But do I have anybody in my circle of influence that is from or gives a different perspective rather than my own? You know, and I think, Justin, you talked about, you know, the American race story, you know, is, hey, man, Black people, white people, and all of that history. But the reality is, even though Black and white bookend, you know, this conversation, we do have the history of Japanese internment, the Chinese Exclusion Act, Native American conquest, you know, Spanish-speaking people on the West Coast with lynchings. And so it's important for us to recognize that this impacts all of us. But in order for us to do it well, we can't just look at what was wrong, but we have to look at the lens of possibility of what we want to be. You know, one of the most iconic people in the American history is Martin Luther King Jr. And, you know, no matter who you are, you probably heard the I Have a Dream speech. And it is one of the most popular orations in the history of the modern world. And I think the question is, why do we love it so much? You know, why do we care about it so much? And I really believe the answer to that question is because he does something when it comes to this conversation about all of us and not just some of us, is that he points to what can be. So much of this conversation is what was, what happened in the past, how that past impacts today, the is, but very seldom do we talk enough about what can be. And the I Have a Dream speech gives us the future, gives us a can be. It gives us a beautiful picture of what could possibly happen if we come together and we transcend all the barriers and the designations and the boxes that have been given to us, and we come together in common humanity, the universality of the human experience. And there's something beautiful in that, and it catches us. It's like, again, I'm referencing the Olympics, but like when there's the parade of nations and everybody comes in and they're wearing uniforms that celebrate their cultural heritage, and everybody, though they may not be friends, everybody is civil or peaceable, at least at that time. And as an observer, it's a beautiful thing to see that. And I think that creating the atmosphere, like you talked about, Justin, is what is our common vision? But I believe our common vision has to be rooted in a beautiful possibility. One of the things that we talk about is, how can we create a more beautiful world? And if you think about that, if we're going to create a more beautiful world, it's not going to take just that group of people or that group of people or this group of people. It's going to take all of us leaning in together and saying, listen, what is our common goal and what is our collective vision? And when we have a common goal and a collective vision, then I think it begins to create the foundation and the atmosphere and the environment for something extraordinary to happen.
That's so cool. That's like just the perspective shift of like fixating on the past, fixating on your problems, and having the awareness to pivot away from that and be like, okay, this is what's true. What do we do about it? Like that's so relevant. I mean, that's helpful just to this entire conversation. But selfishly, I'm just like, I've been working so hard on my own like problems and like the ways that my childhood traumas and all these things. And I've recently just started to make that realization just for myself personally of like, okay, so this is what happened to me, and these are my issues. Now what? And just to have that all wrapped up in this it's a really cool synchronicity. And that also kind of leads me to my next question, which is like, what are the common what are the common obstacles that are going to come up in this kind of thing? Like, what typically gets in the way of us building a more diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging oriented future? Like, what typically opposes those values? Either of you guys can take that.
Felix, do you want to start?
I think take it first.
Oh, okay, I'll take it first. Okay, I think one of the challenges is that this is hard. And it's hard because things were already set up a certain way. So for example, we work with organizations all over the United States as well as internationally. And so a lot, or I would say some, organizations want things to look different, but not act different. So it's like if you could imagine a house or a structure. It's like, oh, wait a minute. This paint or this color or this style is out of style. So what we need to do is we need to paint it different. We need to change the outer construction. Let's change the roof. Let's build a different facade or an area for people to come in and sit down. And it's beautiful, okay? But nothing about the building is foundationally different. Even though it looks different, it isn't different. And so one of the biggest challenges is that when we're trying to create atmospheres of diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, it's not just looking a certain way, it's behaving in a different fashion. And that means you have to adjust the power structures and the access and opportunity. So if we're going to be equitable, then we need to have different voices at the table that are invested, and their voices will be received and respected. It can't just be cosmetic. We painted the building differently, but we behave the same. The foundation of the house has to be adjusted. The roots of the tree have to be addressed. One of the challenges is that we deal with paint and cosmetics. We deal with branches on the tree, but we don't deal with the roots. But if we get the roots right, the branches take care of themselves. So one of the biggest challenges is addressing the foundation and how influence happens, how power is leveraged, who has the power, who has the influence, who has the opportunity, who can bring change. And if that isn't equitably dispersed, then we may have representative diversity. We may look different around the table. We may have a cool website. We may be able to, our Instagram may look good, but if we don't do business differently, then even though we look different, we're really the same. So I think one of the biggest challenges is that in order to do this right, we have to be foundational. We have to be root focused. And when we do that, it will change the way that we behave, but it takes longer to do that. And because it's hard work to get at that root level, we just rather just paint the building different and put a different roof on and keep it moving. I think one of the biggest challenges is that the challenge of some of that foundational work individually as well as collectively, and our lack of awareness and to some degree even fear to be able to step into the unknown. And I don't know if you said it, Justin, or Felix said it, but the power of relationships because it can't just be about something I believe from a definition I read in a book or I heard in a talk. It has to be where's the relationship that I have? Because if I have a relationship with somebody, if I have a relationship with a group of people and they are valuable to me and they are showing me love and I'm investing in a relationship and it's a reciprocal value going back and forth, you know what? Mistakes are going to happen. We're going to get it wrong. But the foundation of that connectivity across the divide from a human standpoint is going to give us the ability to be able to navigate that challenge, to navigate that pain, to navigate that misunderstanding. But if we don't have that human connectivity, then as soon as I'm offended, as soon as I'm afraid, as soon as I'm uncomfortable, as soon as I don't understand, then I'm going to go ahead and step back. The foundational work is us realizing that this isn't just about definitions. This is not just about flowcharts or websites or different pictures or paint. This is about human connection. And that human connection done well can transform the world.
My turn. Thanks, Julian. Well, I totally agree with what you have said. Definitely agree with the part where, it's important to all start from that foundation, and that I also agree that it is very hard for different cultures of people to get together actively. I think simply because culture affects how we think, behave, interpret, and also how we judge, our judgments regarding the world, right? So, and because of that, it also brings us together, right? People sharing the same culture, we tend to, whenever we have any issues, any problems, we feel that connectivity, right? We can confide within the same culture because we understand each other better. So that kind of comfort zones as well. But I also see that when people come together and try to explore other cultures, one way could be also out of necessity. And I say this just using like the whole concept of in terms of healthcare in medicine, right? Western medicine versus your traditional Chinese medicine. Some people would rather go for the traditional Chinese medicine for non-invasive treatments, for example. I just want to see whether there's any other alternatives than surgeries, for example, or long-term medication that might, that's it could be maybe even worse for your body. We don't know, right? But traditional Chinese medicine is a concept where I think that's where diversity really comes along very strongly, and there's need. There's a problem or there's an issue to solve, and people will tend to then go for alternatives, and that's where people will start and ask about a bit more and find out a bit more about what is this thing of the different culture. That's what I think we also need to, in terms of how to bridge this challenge and help this whole, in Singapore, I think we do it pretty well. I think worldwide, internationally as well. But in Singapore, for example, in our food courts or cafeterias, we have food from all over, like for different cultures, simply because of we need the diversity because of some dietary restrictions, for example. But at the same time, that marketplace offers the diversity of food that we can actually connect with each other through food. And I think that's like one of the biggest Singaporeans' pastime, which is like just to try different cuisines, and that's the lowest barrier to culture. I mean, we get together and, you know, maybe an Indian person will want to introduce you to how to really order correctly in the Indian restaurant, rather than just like, oh, just give me chicken curry or just give me this and that. So much more to Indian cooking that maybe an Indian person can show you a lot more, and that's where things get interesting. So I feel that, well, the challenge is really that people are in comfort zones, but at the same time, to go around it, we need to find these little nuggets and of opportunities to get together, and it's about, at organizational level, it's how we create that atmosphere and opportunity. You know, how do we then make these things happen? And these things doesn't need to be too difficult. It can be as simple as food, but it also can be as simple as appreciating a Chinese film, for example, a Malay film, a Japanese film, and talk about it. And I think that's where, you know, for example, myself, I learned so much about Korean culture through watching Korean dramas. So that's really one aspect of using media entertainment to bridge that gap. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. I think from what I'm hearing, basically the main challenge is the fear of stepping into the unknown, and then also becoming aware of the temptation to don or wear the diversity, equity, inclusion, the fashionability of it cosmetically, and to be able to recognize that and to be like, no, like we got to get to the root. Like it's basically like the fear of stepping into the unknown, the temptation to do it in a shallow way, and basically like the avoidance of like the hard work. Because yeah, you can't just paint the house. Like sometimes you really have to consider, we might have to like break this entire thing down, just like actually fix the foundation. And I think the fear of having to do that amount of work and the complexity of that can definitely be a big thing. And I think to both of y'all's points, it's like you kind of have to just return to the anchor, which is human connection, whether that's through like an organization's mission, or through the enjoyment of food, or through trying to create new kinds of music. It really just comes down to the individual passions and connections, and sometimes necessities, as you said, with healthcare. But it comes down to the human level, like what do the individual humans need? So that's really cool. We're into the time of Q&A. Do we have, Christina, do we have any questions? No? Okay, I mean, we can go through our standard set then. So with 12 Petals,
okay,
one of the things.
Hang on, sorry. Tanin has a question.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. Hey, Tanin.
Yeah, it's really more of a comment on what Julian has said earlier in the chat, rather than a question. And he did mention access to opportunities as being one of the factors. And I would just like to share a case that I have actually met before when I was working in Myanmar, and I met a church pastor, and he's probably around his 70s right now, and he's been a church pastor all his life, but he actually liked violin, and he would tell me, you know, when he was a teenager and he would play the violin. He didn't say practice violin. He would play the violin at least 3 hours a day, and sometimes more. And so then, and he did that when he was a teenager, and maybe he had a few lessons, but not formal lessons. So then after that, he didn't continue with it, even though he started with it a little bit working. But then he said, you know, what can you do with the violin? It's my career path is, he's a bright guy, and I'm sure he was very talented when he was young in every way, not just musically. So then people say, oh, he finished high school, let's groom him and train him to be a pillar of the community. And then he became a church pastor, because that's his career path. So then the thing is, after that, he was still very interested. And then there was another individual I met, another part of the community, and he played Kachin traditional flute. And he played it for a very, very long time, since he was young as well. And he trained his children, his two sons, to play flute as well, and they volunteer for community festivals, Thanksgiving services, yeah, so things like that. So we do have people who are very knowledgeable and who really are hungry for music, but somehow they didn't have the opportunities. And I think that in locally in Singapore, there are people like that too. So then I think a lot of the times, then in Singapore especially, then it's opportunities for people who, like a lot of us who do it for a living, working musicians, versus the people who are amateurs. For example, the church pastor was an amateur, but you know that if he had the opportunity, he could have been a musician. But because he couldn't earn a living and he was needed for something else in the community, so he didn't become a musician. So then, so if we are going to help people to reach the highest potential, like what Julian has mentioned, then how about this group of people if we are talking about inclusivity in the arts? Because yes, we have professionals, and we have a lot of resources that we have spent ourselves individually, and also through our schools, our colleges. But then these people, they may be interested too, and that might be a little more that they can go to becoming even better, even though it's not their vocation, even though they had to spend most of their time in their own jobs. So that is one thing that I did observe locally in Singapore, with professional people and amateurs who could be really good, or who are really interested, and how could they have the space and the resources to really blossom in that area. Thank you.
Well, I just would just like to say, it's a powerful story, and it just really illustrates that we don't have an issue with talent. We just have we have an issue with opportunity. We don't have an issue with gifting. We have an issue with access. And so if we gave access, then the gentleman that you spoke about, not that he's not doing a great job, I'm sure, in local church ministry, but if somebody's going to spend 3 hours a day playing an instrument, it shows that they not only have the capacity for it, but they also have the passion. And so how many musicians, how many songs, how many dancers, how many great symphonic masterpieces never came to be? Not because the talent wasn't there, the gifting wasn't there, or the ability was not present, but the opportunity wasn't, the training wasn't, the tutelage wasn't, the belief wasn't. And so people shrunk to the boxes that were given to them, and they got small when they're built to be beautiful and amazing. And not that what they are doing isn't valuable, but I would much rather choose rather than be chosen for.
Much rather choose rather than be chosen. Can you clarify that again? Can you contextualize that last part?
So for example, let's just say, I live in an area of the world where people that wear blue shirts are supposed to work in the industrial field. And so, hey man, you're one of the blue shirt people, you have to work in a factory. That's your lot. Okay, if I choose to work in a factory, if I choose that industry, then you know what? That's my choice. But what if I want to be a dancer? What if I love ballet? What if I love the violin or the oboe? What if I love the percussions or the flute? What if I love that? And what if I have the capacity for it? What if I'm a writer? What if I'm a filmmaker or a photographer? I could choose those things if I had the opportunity, but because it's chosen for me, those opportunities can never be chosen by me. And so I would say, again, I can choose, or you can choose for me. And inequity chooses for people where opportunity allows them to choose for themselves.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's part of the answer to the question, like, what do we want our future to look like, right? It's to be able to match the amount of opportunities to the amount of people who are wanting to choose something for themselves. Yeah, that's really cool. We're at the last few minutes of our fireside chat.
Felix, do you have anything to add? Did you?
Oh, no. Is it okay? Okay. No, I just wanted to share about just write on about you opportunity and success, and about the ability to choose. I resonate with that, especially because I'm in a very tough field in the music industry. So that's I agree. It's really how you want to make your own life, what you want to make your life to be. Whether if you want to be a violinist or a great flautist, then you have to the opportunity and gain the access to becoming one. So interestingly, when you just talk about Myanmar, I actually got to know about this famous U Tin E. He unfortunately passed, quite old. He's a great violinist, but I wouldn't if it's not for one of my friends who is connected to another friend, and we placed had to climb 7 stories of stairs, 7 flight, because he stays in the 7th story, and he doesn't, and there's no lift, there's no elevator in his apartment, and such a great player. He could have I mean, given the opportunity to he could be a lot more world famous in that sense, but I think he had a very big mission, and that is really develop the Myanmar scene, the musical scene, especially in terms of violin, and up to his up to when I saw him actually just 2 years ago. He was still teaching very actively, and trying to, I think that's a mission that he wants to take, so I just wanted to share that because I think he's a really good guy, and more people should know him internationally, but it's just fortunate. I mean, it's fortunate for him, but it's just it's unfortunate for me not to know him much earlier, so that I think more people should know about the great work he has done. And I mean, this brings back about the point about opportunities and access. It's for that person itself, it's also for the rest of the world, whether we have that opportunity and access to get to know these greats and some of the good things that they have done. I mean, bringing it back, I think this to this conversation, I think that's what 12Petals has been doing a good job for really bringing this opportunity, so that like, for example, I don't know, but I certainly enjoyed having to hear him speak today, and a lot from it. Yeah, just wanted to say that. Yeah, thanks.
Oh,
sorry, Justin, for
I was just going to say, hey, thank you so much for letting me be here. Felix, been extraordinary learning from you today. And I'm just very, very thankful for the work that you're doing at 12Petals, and that I got a chance to be a part of tonight's Fireside Chat.
Thank you. I mean, thank you guys both. Yeah, that's our time. I mean, I learned so much. This was supposed to be educational for our audience, and I'm like, I have so much to think about after this. And yeah, thank you guys so much for spending your hour with us so late at night and also early in the morning from wherever you guys are. Yeah, that's it for our Fireside Chat. Do we have any closing things, Christina?
We just have thank you everyone for joining us tonight in the morning, wherever you are. I think we have more coming up. Just I guess follow us on Facebook, Instagram, the website. We have all the details of the upcoming chats and whatnot. So yeah, we hope to see all of you again in the next session. So
all right.
thank you everyone. Thank you for your time.
You.